According to Iranian media, there was a mutiny on the Lincoln aircraft carrier when the captain of the ship came up and told the sailors that they wouldn't be going home for another 30 days at least. And they started booing him, throwing bottles at him. It turned into a massive fight, which involved knives, killed 7 people, and injured 7 others.
Many members of U.S. service members are concerned about the conditions on board the USS Lincoln. No, that ship is moving. That ship is moving right now.
A lot of the conditions that they report led to that mutiny are real. Clogged toilets, moldy showers, lack of food, no packages from home, and no leave. Just awful conditions on the longest voyage, probably in naval history, without a port call. Iranian state media said that there had been a mutiny on it and that 7 members of the crew had actually been killed as a result. This was denied by the Navy and by the Pentagon. But the real issue here, of course, is that conditions have gotten so bad on the Lincoln that a story as seemingly far-fetched as that of a mutiny with 7 people killed actually makes sense, that it almost rings true. The Navy and Pentagon have lost their credibility as a result of this mess. The damage wasn't done by Iranian propaganda. The damage was done by the mishandling of the crisis by the United States itself. Iran tried to fill the vacuum with its own story. Now, here's where things stand. As this story finally broke properly in the press, the ship was sent back. So this is sort of the timeline. On August 3rd, it is reported that a sailor went into the water. Um, 2 days later, the George Washington Strike Group left Da Nang, Vietnam, on its way to replace the Lincoln in the Persian Gulf. On August 11th, the Military Times published the report by the family. On August 13th, the Wall Street Journal reported that that carrier swap was going to take place. The next day, the acting Navy Secretary announced that the Lincoln is returning home. Now, officials say now that this rotation was planned before these reports came out. Um, they say that it occurred 6 days before the Military Times published the story. And I don't know if there's any reason to believe that, but even if that is true, that occurs after the soldier jumped into the water. That may have been the impetus for the swap. Also, the fact that maybe they knew, because questions were being asked by the press, that this was about to break. I don't think that this was a planned replacement. I think that this was at least trying to head off the fact that it was about to be published. Now, there's a reason the Lincoln was out there for so long and wasn't replaced. Bringing in the George Washington from the Pacific Ocean has a massive cost for the United States strategically and for the naval deployment. The home port of the George Washington is in Yokosuka, Japan. It's the one carrier that is permanently in the Western Pacific. Its job is to deter the Chinese from making moves on Japan, North Korea from making moves on South Korea, China from making moves on Taiwan, basically to keep American interests in East Asia um, flowing. Possibly the most important outcome of this is that now the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, they see that the United States is not able to field 2 carriers in the Middle East and a carrier in East Asia. Its ability to wage war on 2 fronts, never mind 3 fronts, possibly involving Russia, um, is deeply questionable at this point. Carriers have a cycle. They deploy, they come home, they go into the yard, they work up the next crew, and they go out again. This isn't bureaucracy. This isn't ineptitude. That's what you need in order to keep a vessel as large as a U.S. carrier out in the ocean, deployable and doing its job. And now that the Lincoln has been out for so long, it's going to be in maintenance and retraining for longer because there's been more damage, more of the crew needs to be replaced. So the Navy is going to be shorthanded for longer. There's a readiness spiral here. Once you start keeping a carrier out in the field for too long, it takes a toll on everything else. Now, how that sailor ended up in the water is contested. The Central Command said that he fell overboard, but the Navy fully admitted that it was a mental health episode. And we have strong reasons to believe it was a mental health episode. And that's because for a long time, there have been reports coming out of the very difficult conditions on that ship, conditions that no other deployment in US naval history has had to deal with. We're talking about 8 months of deployment over 260 days, when anything approaching 200 days is considered a very long stretch. They had no port of call, no time at the bar, no R&R, just being stuck in a very small steel box with hundreds of other people in your section. Crew of the Lincoln says that this is a record for any naval deployment in U.S. history. And we're talking about a ship that cost the American taxpayer $4.5 billion and doesn't have toilets that work. And Navy leaders have acknowledged all these problems with the ship's toilets. And they said that they were working to address concerns about the showers as well. They admitted to a backlog of food and of mail and explained it this way. It had become difficult to get supplies out of Bahrain to the ship because of the war. So that's not an allegation. That's not the family. It's not a politician. That's the Navy admitting that it had a problem and conceding the specifics. And when an institution like the Navy does that, you know you have a very serious problem. And here's what the Navy said to CBS, and this is very revealing, I thought. It said, quote, leadership prioritized mission critical supplies, first food, then hygiene items, then mail. So they're basically claiming here that they are putting mail at a lower priority, that they're putting hygiene at a lower priority and focusing first on food. They're admitting that they're shortchanging some of the most important priorities that the crew needs in order to feed them, keep them alive, and keep them working. So it's a logistic chain admitting they have an order of operations. And of course, those packages from home, as anyone who's served on the front will tell you, are one of the main elements keeping individuals sane in very difficult conditions. The Navy also told CBS that they know that there are problems with, quote, continuous access to clean water, functional AC, and healthy meal options. So they're acknowledging problems with toilets, clean water, functional AC, and with all this, there's not enough mental health support for the people on these ships. And that has some consequences. Now, as for the sailors, what are the sailors on the ship saying? Well, you're not supposed to complain about the conditions in your posting while you're on there. That's not what soldiers are supposed to do. But journalist Aaron Parnas managed to get in contact with some of the sailors on that ship. And according to them, they said, quote, the crew is burned the hell out, and quote, the ship can't handle it anymore. These aren't Pentagon documents. This is a journalist reporting, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And it certainly would seem to um, confirm conditions that even the Navy is admitting that they have. And this isn't just happening on the Lincoln. It has to be noted. This is a Navy-wide problem. The USS Tripoli um, is also having some of these issues. And people on it told CNN's Jim Acosta that the crew members are losing a lot of weight because they're not being fed enough. One mother told Jim Acosta that her son lost more than 30 pounds in 4 months, that soldiers were discouraged from being allowed to talk about these shortages, and that this individual who lost all that weight also had to talk another crew member out of taking his own life. It's a different ship, but it's the same fleet, and it's the same war, and it's the same 8 months timeline, and it takes the same toll on soldiers. And while all this is happening, terrified families couldn't get the information that they needed off the ship. So think about them. Their kids have been gone since November. The return that they were supposed to get on May has been postponed, and there's no date uh, about it that has been released. You start hearing posts about sailors jumping overboard. You start hearing reports of conditions on these ships, some of which are exaggerated, but many of which are accurate. And instead of contacting the families, the Navy and the Pentagon allowed this flow of information to continue without um, disabusing them of their fears, without giving them official information. They had to hear about it from strangers on the internet instead. The Navy's been fighting back and giving its own numbers, which they say contradict this story. So, first, they say that 84% of those on the Lincoln have signed up for reenlistment on the ship. But of course, that could involve pressure while they're on there. We don't know under what conditions, and it'll be interesting to see how many people keep that once they've actually left. In addition, the Navy and Pentagon claim that there are robust mental health facilities on the ship, but they hadn't added any to what was there. And the facilities that they had on the ship were designed for a much shorter deployment. So on the ship, there are 5 chaplains, a clinical psychologist, a clinical social worker, and some behavior health technicians. Certainly enough for a normal deployment, but not enough for a complete and total mental health crisis like this. So when they're saying that they have sufficient resources on the ship, not for that kind of overlong deployment, putting tremendous stress on the staff here.